Ronnie, first of all, congratulations on your Order of Canada.
Oh, baby, thank you very, very much. I'm telling everybody it's getting hard for me to be humble now.
I wonder if that makes you feel a little different as a Canadian, when you
Well,
find that out and when you're taking.
it was a miracle for me to do it because I'm a fan of Canada's. I'm telling you what, in 1958, when we first arrived in Canada, we thought it was, like a Siberia or something. We thought everybody had to wear coats all the time. And we didn't know nothing about Canada, and we're only, 1,200 miles away, I think. But anyway, they put that Medicare thing through the same year, 1958. Tommy Douglas, out there, I guess that's catching one. So I told Levon, I said, Levon, we're in the promised land. So I've been saying that ever since, and I've even done interviews now to people because I've been saying it so long, and so much they ask me every now and then. They said, Ronnie, what makes Canada, so much a promised land? I said, well, there's hundreds of things I could think of, but just one or two for me. I said, I came up here broke as the Ten Commandments, made $3 million, spent five, and didn't have to go to jail. Try that in another country. Better not try that with the IRS. They start out with waterboarding, and then it gets rough.
Well, I guess it beats being a bootlegger in Arkansas,
Oh,
doesn't it?
well, everybody's bootleggers in Arkansas in the old days.
I hear you were 12 years old when you started driving and had a driver's license in Arkansas.
We did it with special license because they hadn't got the buses through yet for the pickup kids to take them to the school. So for the country kids that live out, didn't have a way of getting there. So you're allowed to drive at 12 with a special license. So
With
I played James Dean out there.
and you had some booze in the trunk getting that around. And
No, that was another trip there. I was 17 by then, before we started running the booze to Oklahoma. That was a good job, $100 a trip. My dad made about $80 a week, so I was making $100 a day or 200 a day or a few times 300 a day, and that's a lot of money back then.
Ronnie, I had the pleasure of interviewing Dale Hawkins before he passed away, and he just said so many nice things about you, obviously. And I was just curious, his hit, Susie Q,
Yeah.
came along before you became established.
Oh,
And that
yeah.
must have been a real inspiration for you, was it?
Well, let me tell you, we learned Susie Q from the jukebox. I had no earthly idea that was my cousin. No idea for maybe a year or two or three. And I knew there was James Burton on that guitar, but so his name is Delmer Allen, so I did not know him as Dale, and because he moved away to Louisiana when we were very young. His mom, they got divorced, and his mom got remarried and moved to Louisiana. But I was just with him not too long ago for his last family reunion. He was still alive, and a couple of my other cousins were still alive then. And we got together and did everything. And that was the four boys that our four dads played together in a band, the Hawkins band,
Wow.
in Hawkins Holler. But three of them's gone now.
I've also had the pleasure of spending some time in Arkansas, especially Helena, Arkansas.
Oh, my.
And that's kind of where your old stomping grounds is. And didn't you have a band in Helena at one time?
Oh, yeah, no, we put the band together in Helena. That's where we put the band together. I went to Memphis. They hired me to come down and be the front man for the session guys from Sun and some of those other labels, and offered me $100 a week and room and board, all expenses. I said, whoa, what a job this is. And so I told everybody in Arkansas twice that the big boys in Memphis want me to sing for them. And by the time, I'll make it a quick story, and by the time I got there, they had broken up over who was going to be leader. Those intelligent things that musicians do, they're capable of doing things like that. So I took Jimmy Ray Paulman. He was the lead guitar player and the best in Memphis. He had married a girl from West Helena, Arkansas. So that's when I went back to Helena. I had some friends there. I got a little job helping at a motel, Rainbow Inn Motel, for room and board, because the old boy loved music and that, and I cleaned up a little bit. And so and we started rehearsing. And we picked up Levon Helm. Jimmy Ray Paulman had a cousin by the name of Will Pop Jones, and he'd been playing a couple, 3 years with his little band, piano. And so he knew about this young drummer. Didn't have any drums or nothing, but he was really, really good on drums, and the timing and everything. And that was Levon Helm. And so we got together and started rehearsing because Diamond Helm, which was Levon's dad's name, he said he's not leaving town until he gets his graduation. His graduation from Marvell, Arkansas, high school. He said he'll be the first Helm to ever get a high school education. And that was a fact. So we had to wait a few months, but we had to practice anyway. And we played on weekends. So then we took off, and then we got this chance because Jimmy Ray Pullman had played in Canada a couple of times with different groups, 2 or 3 different groups. They'd come up to New York, and then the agent would try to book them over. And then he was saying that they accept rock and roll in Canada really, really good. So we were just looking anywhere where they'd have us. But that's how I come to Canada, the promised land.
In your days in Memphis, did you go down to Beale Street very much? Was that where it was?
I was on Beale Street. I went there at 17. That was 1952. They didn't have rock and roll, or they had boogie and blues, but I went down there to learn some new songs because I had me a little Al Jolson routine put together. I'd seen that movie Al Jolson. I thought, oh man, look at that, he's doing all. So I got all the moves down and learned just about all his songs. But so I'm gonna go down to Memphis because I've been told by all my friends that's where the real music is that I wanted to hear. And I went down there, and sure enough, it was the greatest bands I'd ever heard. Maybe now they just be common, I don't know. But for me then, it was unbelievable talent in Memphis.
And of course, there was Handy Park as well, which had, I guess, people playing like on the corners, country blues artists, jug bands, and things like that. Do you have a memory of that as well?
What I remember B.B. King playing on the corner, street corner. He'd go back. He told a story when he got his first club down there, the B.B. King's place. He told a story about he used to play on the street for, I don't know, $2 a night or whatever it was, $2. And he says, this redneck from Arkansas came down, did a poor job of copying me, and made $3. And looked at me and laughed. But he's still playing, I hear. He got to be 104. Because he was big when I was just a kid.
I wanted to ask you about your thoughts about blues being part of what you did over the years, and having grown up in Arkansas and having an interracial band, as a teenager, and I think A.C. Reed was part of your band.
AC. He went on to be somebody.
Yeah,
he's an Oklahoma boy.
Yeah,
and the other guys. But I was in the Army. I guess I don't know what year that'd be. I can't remember time or anything anymore. But I was serving my time in the Army, and you could mix bands in the Army. You could have racial and interracial bands, because you're playing for the officers and non-coms and all that stuff in the military. But when we started to take it out and take it around, that's when we had some problems. Because there's some redneck people. Shit, there's redneck people down there now. I mean, boy, they used to have a sign, a great big sign at the county line of Stillwell, Oklahoma, that said, if you're a nigger, do not let the sun catch your ass here.
Wow.
And it stayed on there till the 60s. And somebody didn't take that thing down, and boy, I couldn't believe it. I said, we got to take pictures of this sign because the young blacks ain't going to believe this one. But it went on about 10 years longer than it should have, because I guess he just missed it, or it was so bad. But that was a sign that was there, and we remember it well. See, Arkansas, where I come from, it didn't have any much tension or anything. It was a university town, and there's not that many black population. But in Memphis was different. Memphis, they had wars down there, racial wars and stuff. I don't know, a few years ago, just before I got there, I think 70, 80 blacks got killed, from a racial war. That's the story anyway. But it still wasn't, you noticed it.
Yeah. Bo Diddley, of course, was a good friend of yours, and I remember I had a wonderful interview with Bo Diddley, and we talked about you quite a bit because he really considered you a friend, and you did so much for him in Canada too. You opened a lot of doors, didn't you?
I loved old Bo. I first met him. I was doing those Alan Freed shows. Can you remember Alan Freed? You can't remember Alan Freed. You're too young. But he had the big shows in New York. He was the biggest disc jockey in the world at that time. Dick Clark came along a few years later. But anyway, he booked Bo Diddley on it. And Bo was so good. I'll tell you some names. You won't know who they are, but they were big then. Jackie Wilson. Jackie Wilson was a kid. Well, Michael Jackson copied just about everything that he did. He was a showman, dancer like that, you know. But then I saw Bo, and he had more rhythm. I mean, I'm sure Segovia would say he's not very good on the guitar, but Segovia couldn't do the stuff he was doing, I'll tell you that. But he was good and funny, and I got to know him. We recorded, I think, something. What we did, Hey Bo Diddley. I put Hey Bo Diddley and Bo Diddley together, and then we recorded maybe 2 or 3 other songs somewhere down the line. I can't remember anything anymore. I mean, 80 years old, and it's a rough 80.
Who do you love?
A hard 80. Who do you love? And Bo Diddley. But I always wanted to go on tour. I got him up here and a couple of times and got him some. This was when he had faded out. Nobody could remember him. So we promoted the hell out of him, got him up here playing. We went over again. Then I brought him up to be my opening act for the Royal York. And then I played one night, had a heart thing, and took off, and he had to finish a week for me. He took me straight to the emergency in the hospital.
Wow.
You know, I was drinking a bottle of brandy a day in those days.
Really?
The old man was living pretty rough, pretty hard.
It was Henry Glover who produced Bo Diddley and Who Do You Love?
Yes, it was. Oh, Henry, what a guy.
Yeah?
Henry was an Arkansas boy, too, by the way, Hot Springs, Arkansas. So of course, I don't know how he got to New York, but he must have gone through music school or something, because he was head of A&R for Roulette Records at that time. And he'd found and recorded a lot of superheroes. James Brown, for instance. He discovered James Brown and put James Brown and the Flames, I think was the name.
And Little Willie John. He produced for King Records, right?
Oh, Little Willie John. Yeah. I love Little Willie John. Music, you know, and Jimmy Reed. I loved all those cats' songs because they tell a story, but it's just different.
Yeah.
I mean, Jimmy Reed, he wrote the greatest love songs, I think. Him and Hank Williams wrote the sad ones. Poor old Hank, every song he wrote was sad about love. But Little Richard, or the harp, who's we talking
Little
about?
Walter?
Little Walter was the best. Jimmy Reed.
Jimmy Reed.
Jimmy Reed.
Yeah.
I don't know if you ever paid any attention to any of his lyrics, but he says, "You know I love you, baby. You know I love you, babe. You know I love you, baby. And you don't even know my name. Listen to me, baby. I tell you what I would do. I would rob, steal, kill somebody just to get back home to you." He says, "They may kill me, baby, and bury me like they do. My body may lie, but my spirit gonna rise and come home to you." Now, is that a love song or what is it? That's pretty stout.
Well, those...
Jimmy Reed, A.C. Reed was his cousin. I don't know if you knew that or not.
No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, they were, no, not cousins. They had, which one? They had the same father, but not the same mother.
Oh,
that was the thing that was different. So they were step brothers, or whatever they call that, half brothers. Yeah. And AC later on he went on to Chicago because I saw him with his band in Ottawa 1,000 years later, and he was working out of Chicago. He had moved to Chicago, and he had a few hit albums.
Yeah.
So he did okay.
Yeah. Just getting back to Who Do You Love and Bo Diddley and those sessions that Henry Glover produced, and of course the band backing you up with the Hawks, who later became the band. I was just listening to them again coming out here to see you, and there's just something about those tracks that is so alive and so exciting.
Well, I tell you what, everything we recorded, we had been playing on the road. So because we learned the songs on the road because it's expensive to try to learn a song in a studio. So we learned the songs first, so we could go through the sessions just like we were playing. It was almost live, you know, because we could cut like every 3 hours we could cut 3 or 4 songs because we knew them so well. And Henry Glover, of course, he'd done a lot of big acts, and he hit it right on with "Who Do You Love" and Bo Diddley.
And of course, Robbie's guitar playing on there.
Robbie Robertson was, I think, 17 years old, and it was one of the wildest. If you listen to it today on a good system, that's one of the wildest guitar rides you will ever hear. King Curtis, can you remember the name? You know, he got killed in breaking up a fight and got knifed, but he was one of the great ones. He says, this kid here has got something. It's talking about Robbie Robertson there. He was at the session, you know, and that's when he started that whining and stuff. And there's a lot of stories about that "Who Do You Love." It take too long for me to go into it, but there was a mass murderer out of Arizona, Phoenix, Arizona, and he's one of them high school kids. That was a hero, good looking and all, but he was a little guy, and he had a complex about being, you know, 5'2" or 3" or whatever it was. Good looking kid. But anyway, to make a long story short, there's, I don't know, 20 or 30 girls killed or disappeared, and he was killing them and taking them to the desert, and he never did get caught. And when he did get caught, they started tracing his steps. And so he said he'd come here at this time of day here, he'd come in here, and he'd go to the jukebox, and he would play Ronnie Hawkins' "Who Do You Love?"
Wow.
Over and over and over again. I walked 47 miles of barbed wire. I used a cobra snake for a necktie. Got a brand new house on the roadside, made from rattlesnake hide. Got a brand new chimney made on top, made from a human skull. Now come on, mama, let's take a little walk and tell me, who do you love? So I don't know, there's something wrong with him, of course. Anybody who'd kill anybody, there's something wrong with. But it took a long time, 3 or 4 years he got away with it. And he was just raping them, you know, for a day or two, then killing them and then taking them out in the desert, which is close, I guess, in Arizona there, Phoenix, and burying them. And they just went on the disappearing act. But like I said, they had a magazine called Life magazine then. Can you remember Life? It was a big magazine way back then. And they had a story on this guy, and in the Life magazine, it was how he went to the jukebox and played that song every day. "Who Do You Love?" So that's a hell of a story about a song there. It had pictures of him in Life and everything. A good-looking young kid, you know. He looked like, you know, handsome, except he was just little.
Well, you actually recorded the first Robbie Robertson song that was ever recorded when he was in the Hawks, right?
Oh, yeah, Robbie. I think he wrote those 2 songs I recorded when he was 16, 17 years old. What we did was we finished the sessions quick. You rent for a whole session, but then we knew the songs. So we just clicked one, and I had time left over, you know, and I paid for. And so Robbie had written a couple of songs. Let me see if I can remember. I think he was just 16 or 17. Hey Babaloo was one. Right. Hey Babaloo was her name. She don't love me, but I loved her just the same. Treat me mean, treat me cruel, treat me just like I was a fool. I was a fool, hey Babaloo. And the other one is, I need someone like you to tell my troubles to. Oh, baby, someone like you. Pretty good little song for a kid, wasn't it? And Robbie he worked. Whatever, I was with Robbie just not too long ago. We were invited out, and they sent me a nice jet and everything to play for President Clinton's 65th birthday. And they flew me to California and put me up there in that nice, big, fancy Beverly Hills hotel. We lived like kings for a couple, 3 days. And Robbie was there, and a whole bunch of big-time wheels was there. And then when we did the thing with Clinton, every movie star in the world that you can remember, her name was there. He's a popular guy, Clinton is. And so Robbie was, every time we get out there, he gets in that wine, and he's going to do a documentary. Him and Scorsese is going to do a big-time documentary on me. Oh. But they forget about it. They've been saying that for a few years now. Okay. I'm getting a little punchy of it.
I thought Rick Danko was always kind of underappreciated as a member of the band. His singing covered such a great range, and it was so heartfelt, wasn't it?
Well, let me tell you something. Ricky Danko came in with us when he was just turned 17. So he was the whipping boy in a band. They always got somebody you pick on all the time and fool and trick and joke and everything. And but I tell you what, Ricky Danko ended up being as big time for the band as anybody in it. They needed him as much as they needed Robbie or Lee Vaughn or anybody else, because he fit in that mold where he could harmonize with anything, do anything, look good on the stage, and smile, and he became part of the band. If you look at it, like a team, he was as important as anybody, and he was the last one. He played right up until he died. I saw him a couple of times in Scandinavia. We was playing over there, and he had a record in Scandinavia, Ricky Danko did, that was #1. That was an old song I recorded back in the early 50s. And he had it with the famous Swedish folk singer. What was his name? I can't remember anything. Yeah. But they had a duo out on it, and it was #1. And I'm playing over there, just going through the jobs. You always book anything you can, then you got 2 or 3 good jobs, right? So we was playing a big old bar there in Stockholm, I guess it was. I don't know. But anyway, I get a phone call from Ricky, and he's just up the road not too far, and he wanted me to come up. I said, hell, I got a job. I got to play. So he just canceled one set at his place, and they came down to see me. And Sweden. Now, who'd ever thought you'd have seen him in Sweden? He came a long ways he was an apprentice butcher. And he wanted to get married at about 16 or 17 to a big old girl that her daddy had 2 tobacco farms, and she was the only heir. So he was looking for security at 17. And tobacco farms were big back then, boy. I mean, you got a tobacco farm, you had it made.
You saw so many of those young players change on the road. I mean, going on the road and you're 16, 17, 18 years old, playing rock and roll in the early 60s probably changed a lot of those people forever.
Well, I want to tell you something. It was a brand new music. Now it's just, nobody thinks anything about it. But when they first started playing, they didn't start calling it rock and roll, I guess, to 53, 54 maybe. I can't remember. But it wasn't around in 52 when I was there, because we were going to call it something. I forget what we was going to call it. I was just trying to learn songs. But you see, I was 17, so I had to listen to a lot of bands on the outside, because legally I wasn't allowed to come in. Some of the places I went with people, and they took me in, I got to hear it up close, hear the music. Boy, they had some music. And so blues, I started listening to more, because that jazz stuff was too heavy for me. I mean, you have to be a musician of Juilliard to play some of that stuff, but it was great. So blues was simple, like a country song. In fact, blues is country. It's just black country instead of white country. Tells those stories, just like the honky tonks and girls and ladies who did you wrong.
Well, you had a reputation for working your bands in rehearsal all the time.
Yeah.
And
well, the only thing I knew was it's like a hockey team or a basketball team or a football team. The more you work together, the better you get. And that's what I was trying to do, is become very, very good. So if you're playing every night, that's great. But we were also rehearsing 4 and 5 times a week, and a couple hours. Then when Ricky first came in, he was practicing another couple hours, and Ricky Danko or Richard Manuel, the same thing. I hired Garth Hudson to teach Richard Manuel a lot more music than what he knew, and how to teach the rest of the band how to read music and stuff. Garth was he's a kind of a musical genius. That booger was. Nobody can figure him out. He was all. I never did figure him out, but he played what fit. Yeah. Whatever it was there.
So one question I had for you is that, with all the discipline that you had, in controlling the guys when they were rehearsing and working up the shows and everything, when you were on the road with them, you didn't really control them very much, did you?
Well, no, we had good rules. Back then, you see, this is what, 58, 59, 60. First of all, they were too young to really drink. and you could get in a lot of trouble even in Canada. I had to get special permits for Levon, and then Robbie, and then another one, and because you're supposed to be 21 for any bar in Canada, but we got a permit in those dining lounge places where that we didn't stay around and drink. We went back and we finally got a permit to play in because they was trying to get us out of Canada because we were really drawing good. We had lineups on Monday at 7 o'clock at night. And all these other club owners wondered what it was. Then they found out that Levon was 17 years old, and Robbie was 17 or 16, Ricky Danko was 17. So me and Garth was the only old ones. So they really got good. That became one of the best. They would have been one of the best bar acts I'd ever seen, and that's all I was trying to do. I'm just trying to please those people coming in and drinking that beer. So I've got a job. That's what was my job. And so we had that discipline because, young guys will do anything. If you got any money, they'll do just exactly like the band did. They had plenty of money and didn't have to work or didn't have to practice. So what they do, they just booze, drugs, and girls. That's where you go to when you got enough time and enough money.
Well, you took that band down to New York, recorded for Roulette Records at the Bell Studios, one of the places where you recorded
I
there.
think it was the Bell Sound. I remember they called me once in London, Ontario. Morris Levy said, "Ronnie, we want you to fly in and learn a song because they got this new magic stuff going on in Bell Sound." And what that magic stuff was, a 4-track. It was a 4-track, boy, and it was, something else. Yeah. To have a 4-track machine. I guess they were the very first to have one. And
well, you were close to Morris Levy, and he made no pretensions, I understand, about being a gangster. I mean, is it true that he used to sometimes wear guns to meetings?
I never did see him with guns at all because he had people around him, I'm sure, that probably did have guns, But he was the smartest. I learned more watching this man. I mean, he was a gentleman, even though he'd grown up as an orphan. He and his brother was in an orphanage, and you get out at 16, and then you got to make your own way. So Morris used to always say, anyone who can't make a living in New York shouldn't be allowed to go anywhere because anybody can survive in New York City. But he knew everybody. He knew all the underworld. He knew the crime family in New York. Chicago. They wanted to get me when they released, I guess it was 40 Days. They have what they call the truck stops, I guess, jukeboxes back then. And it was always mob control because that's cash. First, you get the first count, and then you tell the government the second count. But he knew them all. And I'm telling you what, he would have made me a superstar by just money alone. Back then, you could buy your way into stardom if you had enough money. And if it hadn't been for the Miami Disc Jockey Convention, they'd been watching the disc jockeys, and they'd been getting this money for payola and not declaring it on the income tax. That was the problem. Those who declared it, like a few of them who declared it, they didn't get in trouble, but 99% of them just took it cash. And Alan Freed was one of them. And there he was, he's living in a $1.5 million home in New York, and then had $1 million house in Florida. But he only made $16,000 a year. So something's going on, right? Yeah. That's about what they made in those days. That's the 50s. But anyway, Morris, he knew everybody and everything, and boy, I learned a lot by just watching him. And he was well respected in that area too, that underworld gang stuff. The Italians and the Hebrews, they get along and do business together.
Roulette was also a label that had some, Buddy Knox was on the label,
yeah.
But also Dinah Washington and Count Basie.
Oh, yeah, they had some good ones. He owned Count Basie. We used to go down to Birdland. He owned Birdland, too.
Yeah.
And me and Levi, he said, you carte blanche, so you can order anything you want to eat, anything you want to drink, anything you want, just sign the tab. It's on us. So, we went down there and lived like a pharaoh. He'd also told the waiters to act like we was big-time heroes or something. You know. Fuck nobody, they didn't even know who we were, right? We said, oh, Mr. Hawkins, come on in here. We got this Frank Sinatra table for you and all this shit, you know. But we'd sit there and watch Count Basie, and he was just a high-class rhythm and blues band then. That what, Big Joe
Williams.
Big Joe Williams, oh, sorry. And 3 or 4 more. And then they had a drummer. Can you remember that drummer's name in his band? Levon copied him. He could really twirl the stick.
Sonny Greer?
Sonny, I think, is getting close. Sonny. Oh, man.
Yeah.
But I think the first name was Sonny. I don't know if I heard it, of course. Yeah. But we used to sit down there and Levon would watch him twirl the sticks and underneath stuff and all that show stuff. Levon had it down in 2 or 3 weeks. And he became a hell of a showman. That was back in the days when you had to, you know, do things besides just play. But Levon really got good. The whole band got extra good.
Well, your stage show from back then, especially, was pretty legendary as far as what you used to. You were kind of a gymnast on stage.
Well, you know, I was a little weak in the voice, so I had to make up for it in show. So I learned and put in every little tricky thing I've learned over the years. The camel walk, which later on they call whatever they call it, some kind of different walk, moonwalk, I think. And then I learned a lot of stuff. There was 2 brothers, black brother dancers, that did a lot of musicals in the 30s mainly, and maybe some of them in the 40s. And one of them did do the camel walk. And then, but I learned it from another young dancer that used to come through with, what do they call them? See, blacks couldn't get any work hardly at all in those early days, so they'd put together these little groups that would come in and do a show for high school kids, college kids, everything, you know, make a little money. And they had a dancer that did that moonwalk, and I went backstage and talked to him, and he showed me how to practice it, so I finally got it down. And I did that on my high school graduation, and my principal said, Ronnie Hawkins, I might have known, because it just broke the crowd up. They never seen anything like that, you know. Yeah. And a bunch of us got together, the old boys, and said, let's do something ignorant. I'll do the camel walk, you do the flips, and you do this, Well, my name was the first one to call, and I did it, and then they didn't do nothing. The rest of them chickened out. Oh my gosh, I felt.
Just to take you back to Helena, Arkansas, and the King Biscuit Flour radio show, which you know you obviously listened to.
We borrowed their equipment. Is what we really did. Yeah.
Sonny Boy Williams.
Sonny Boy, and they had, I think, 30 minutes, 30 minutes a day, and of course they was pushing that flour to the black population, and so they had all their equipment set up in the basement of this old radio station, right. And that's where they recorded them and everything. So this friend of mine at the motel I told you I was working for knew the radio station owner and manager real well. They were old drunks together, and they let us practice there. And so that was there every day.
Wow.
Every day, trying to get this, trying to get that. I think Levon ended up later on buying all that stuff, all that equipment, the drums and everything.
Yeah, it was Peck Curtis on drums and
Robert
Jr. Lockwood, I think.
I don't remember any of the names anymore, but I know Sonny Boy he could blow a harp.
And then you took that name and named King Biscuit Boy, right?
Yeah, I did. Because he could play the blues like them.
Yeah.
And who'd think a kid from Hamilton, Ontario, could even play blues around Celeste, you know? And he knew everything. Every song, every lick, harmonica, and he sung it good too. So he didn't like it at first. I said, I'm just going to call you the Biscuit Boy, King Biscuit Boy, because you sound just as good as the real boys, you know. But then finally he got used to it and kind of liked it.
Ronnie, I hope you don't mind if I asked you about the last waltz and the atmosphere around that, the few days of rehearsals before that, and the parties that were going on. Did everybody stay in one place? And
well, they had. I don't know if they stayed. I think most of them just about stayed in that one hotel, but I went out a month early.
Really?
Yeah, because I'd never seen any of these big time stars. Right? I work 6 and 7 days a week, and if you're working, you don't get to go see anybody. And I actually worked. 6 days a week forever, and half the time at least 7 days a week. So I didn't see much. So I wanted to go out there and see all these big names I'd been hearing about. I mean, I knew about Neil Young and all that bunch. I saw them starving to death in Yorkville, you know, but they were stars by then. But anyway, I hadn't seen, who was the one kid? Van Morrison. Van Morrison came over to me when he was rehearsing. He tore him up, and he said, "Ronnie, you won't remember me," but I think he was 16 years old when he came in. I had the band and the Levon there, and they were red hot. I mean, heavy. He came in, got permission. His aunt and uncle live up here from Ireland, and his mom and dad came up to see him and brought him. And his aunt and uncle had heard about our band, had been in to see us, and got permission for him to come in. And he saw the band rocking. He said it was the best band he ever heard. But he had a little band then, they said. So he'd been musical forever. But he was something else. He's some kind of a genius. I don't know exactly what kind, but he's got something going.
Bobby Charles was there.
Bobby Charles, oh my, yes. There's the ones that, let's see, I'm trying to think of names now. But I loved watching them rehearse. Poor Robbie Robertson, his fingers. You see, they owed, who was it? Capitol, I guess it was. They owed the album to. And they were trying to get it down. Plus, Robbie's trying to rehearse all these acts, everybody. I'm at the very end, and by the time we get there, the time's run out. I went on stage and not rehearsed anything, went straight on, and Robbie kind of froze there. If you look at the thing real close, when they called my name and I went on, Robbie's kind of looking at you. I can tell he's thinking. So I went cha 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 cha, and then he kicked her off.
And then you said, "Big time."
Big time, Bill, big time. But I've seen a lot of weird things. Some of these superstars, they were something else. See, most of them back in there were still into booze, heroin, and everything. It's all that free love and all that shit going on in those days, you know. It was kind of a wild times. Everybody was rocking a little too heavy. Bob Dylan, all of them were just, living pretty fast.
When you saw the premiere of the film, I understand you saw it with the guys in the band. What was your response to the film?
Well, I just saw so many things that I could have done and should have done if I'd known what I was doing. There's a lot I could have added to Who Do You Love, and that what I used to do in bars with Garth. I can bring Garth down because he could do that weird thing on an organ, and I'd say, "Hit the nasty button, Garth." But I didn't do it for the last waltz. I don't know why, but it'd have been good if I had it. Then he'd have turned loose and played that Phantom of the Opera thing he can do, boy. And he was something else.
Yeah. Ronnie, I sure appreciate your time today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for thinking of me, and thanks for bringing this lovely photographer you guys are. I'd hire her if she couldn't even know how to work a camera. If she didn't even have one.
Do you have any last thoughts of where you are in your life right now?
Well, I'm getting ready to play the biggest job, money-wise, I've ever played in my life by far, and that's in August. We're headlining whatever that show is there, and they got some big names there, Pam Tellis and all that bunch of. So for somehow or another, because of the press I've been getting, I think, is we're headlining, and it's a big show for me. Big one.
And I hope there's lots more coming.
Well, I don't know if I'm going to have to get a body transplant here pretty quick. So everything on me is stiff, but the thing it needs to be.
I was just going to ask you have some cars on your property here?
Yeah,
too?
I used to have but I'm getting ready to sell everything. I can't look after them no more. Yeah. I've still got 3 or 4 beauties. Are you familiar with all kinds of cars?
Yeah.
Okay, a 70 Chevelle LS6. Do you know what that means?
No.
Well, that means if it was a convertible, it'd be worth $500,000. Is what that means. The way it is, mine's got one number that they changed, blew a head or blew something, and that took it down from 150,000 to about 80 or 90, because people that pay that kind of money, they want them absolutely perfect. They're just rich collectors. And I've got my old 50 model Mercury still that I bought in Arkansas, after I saw Rebel Without a Cause with James Dean. See, that's what he was driving in Rebel Without a Cause. I went out and got me one. Got a red jacket like he had on too there. Rebel Without a Cause. He was one of my first heroes, boy. And the other one was Marlon Brando, the wild one. I got a motorcycle, got me a leather jacket, and had an artist friend of mine paint skull and crossbones on the back. I had the only two-man motorcycle gang in Arkansas.
Who would do most of the driving on those road trips between Arkansas and Canada?
Well, let me tell you, Levon liked to drive. I mean, he really liked to drive. Jimmy Ray Paulman, and this is going back to the first bunch, he was a really good driver and liked to drive too. Weather didn't make any difference, and I didn't even want to unless one of the other boys got tired, and do that. And then, and of course, in my bed, no drugs, no nothing. But truck drivers had them little pills that keep you like you're drinking a dozen cups of coffee. You're like, I forget what they call them, little orange hearts. And so we take a few of them, and you stay awake, man. You just wake up and you can drive another 12 hours, right? We never see anything like it. And then the band was swapping them around. And after a while, the band got to fighting over who was going to drive. Because I wouldn't let anybody take them except the driver. Taking that little orange pill from Memphis. That truck driver, we used to call that one West Coast turnarounds. That means you can drive the West Coast, turn around, and come back without going to sleep. But you look a little funny when you get back, I'll tell you that.
What would be 2 or 3 days to Arkansas from Toronto? Hamilton?
24 hours.
24 hours?
24 hours. We never stopped ever for anything. We just drove straight through, straight back, straight through. We'd play on Saturday night down there, drive straight through, get everything set up in Canada, because I like to be there as much as I could early, and then go to bed and sleep and rest before we played that night. But that's how we did.
Kelly J, I still see from time to time. He lives in Calgary.
Yeah, I've seen it. Old Kelly, I remember I used to get him up on the stage. He didn't weigh 90 pounds. He was about 6 foot 9, looked like, and you could throw him through somebody if he stiffened up. That's how he wasn't that big around. Now he's over 450 pounds or something. He doesn't look good either. He's got to lose a lot of weight. Because he's up there. He's got a few years on him, and you can't be that heavy all the time. But I guess he liked to eat. I blew myself up that time. I started drinking, half a bottle or a bottle of booze a night, and then we'd go from the club when it closed straight to Chinatown and eat enough for Chiang Kai-shek's Fifth Army, and then go to bed. Boy, that'll put some weight on you quick, I'll tell you that. I blew up. I was afraid to go swimming in the ocean. I was afraid some of them Japs might harpoon me. They harpoon things, them Japs do.
Yeah.
Think there's a big white floating around out there.
Yeah. What was the toughest town that you played in?
Well, Robbie Robertson was just he's doing a book. And he's really doing research like you wouldn't believe. They've given him millions of dollars to do it right. And he can go anywhere he wants to get ideas and stuff. But he remembers a place. He's half Indian and half Hebrew. And the Hebrew side is managing the Indian side, and they're doing real good. But anyway, he'd forgotten the roughest place he said we'd ever played. And he couldn't remember the name of it. But what it was a little town in Oklahoma called Tahlequah, Oklahoma. After we played there once or twice, I would double book because I knew the dance would stop by 10 o'clock. That's why I got all my money in front and everything, because that fight would start, blood this deep in all the dance floor. We just load up and go on to Tulsa and get a second job. But Tahlequah, Oklahoma was probably the roughest. They were still playing cowboys and Indians there for some reason. I don't know what it was, but they'd get drunk, and boy, the wars would start. Blood all everywhere.
Yeah, you'd be lucky to get out of town sometimes.
Oh, well, we had to leave a couple of times in a little bit of a hurry, and they followed us a long ways down the road. Some people, that's when I took You mean, I'm sure you hadn't heard of him, but it was what do they call the group? J. Smith. Jason Smith, I think. Anyway, he was a black kid, good-looking black kid. You know, about that time he was about 21 or 2 then, and he looked almost like he's Jamaican or something, light skin, and he kept that hair processed so it looked straight, looked good, and you know, and so I took him down south, and we were in Arkansas, and so he would go up and say, "Oh no, he's a Canadian Negro." I say, "Tell him you're Spanish. Tell him you goddamn anything, 'cause they're still weird down here, man." And so he got in. Somebody said they was going to hurt him if he sung any more songs in that club. And that's when I pulled my little gun. I pulled it 3 times in my lifetime. Put it for Jerry Lee Lewis, and he finally told that story on tape at the president's deal about me. he was really ornery and mouthing off to 5 or 6 big kids, 27, 28 years old, kind of Italian-looking kids, because we were sitting out on the balcony smoking, and one of the guys said, "How come you didn't play this and that these songs that he wanted to hear?" Because once he gets real high back in those days and drunk, he just starts singing whatever he wants, country songs, religious songs, anything. The first half is always great. The second half, if you like it, is great. But they didn't like it. They didn't hear all Great Balls of Fire and all that stuff. So Jerry said, "I don't like this half. He's drunk." And so he just pissed these guys off. And here they come, boys. So wait a minute, we'll teach your ass a lesson. So I had that little policeman had a special thing. Lou Miles used to make my coat special so they couldn't see that lump in my coat. He's still alive too, Lou Miles. He's 86 years old, I think. But anyway, I pulled it out. I said, "Boys, 5 of you won't make it." There's a 5-shot police special. And so that kind of stopped them a minute. And they kind of backed up, but still cussed and moved and do all this shit. And then I put that gun away. You know what Jerry Lee said? He said, Ronnie said, "I don't think you needed that gun. I think we could have whipped their ass." So I knew then that Jerry Lee's a little crazy. He's a hair crazy. But he told the story, and his daughter had never heard it before in California. It's on film now, so it's way better than me telling it. He was telling it.
You said you pulled the gun out 3 times?
Yeah, I had to pull it out for J. Smith. Then I pulled it out for Jerry Lee. And then the other spot was, what was that? A bad place in Oklahoma. See, what they did, all them gangsters down there would put the liquor license in somebody else's name. But they're still running it, right? That was the trick they were doing then. Bootleggers, this and that, and the other. And so they had a big war type thing going. I'm backing out of the way, and somebody was just out of control. And one of them great big cats grabbed something other and started towards everybody. I said, "Don't come towards me. You don't ever pull a gun unless you are ready to use it if you have to." "Well, I'm ready to use it if you come any closer." And he backed off. Thank goodness. I'd hate to have shot him, but I would have. I'd have pulled that trigger 5 times fast, because I think it was just it's a 38. That's a pretty big slug.
Thank you so much again, Ronnie.
Thank you. And you keep rocking, and the big time is just around the corner.